Naya. Hi Ivor. It's Gaga and Grandma reading you a story before bed. And this story is called Mrs. Honey's Hat. Mrs. Honey had a hat. On Monday, she wore it when she took her grandson Peter to the park. She bought him some bubble gum. And then they sat on the bench with her doing her knitting. Peter thought, those feathers on her hat will make my arrows fly better. So he pulled off the feathers and his bubble gum stuck to the brim. Oh dear. On Tuesday, Mrs. Honey wore her hat to visit a friend. They sat in the garden in the shade of a tree and they ate some cake. What a lovely hat she has. If you look, all these flowers and the bows. While they were sat there, a bird flew down to pick up some crumbs. Those cherries look good. So they flew off with the cherries, and one little bird left some eggs behind on the top of her hat. On Wednesday, Mrs. Honey spent a day at the seaside. The sun shone and the water was just right for paddling, and Mrs. Honey felt very happy. Afterwards, Mrs. Honey took off her hat and sat in the sun, and a hermit crab thought that shell would make a nice new home. So he scuttled away with the shell and left behind some seaweed on her hat. Of course, Mrs. Honey's fast asleep in her deck chair, so she doesn't notice. Not you, Gaga. On Thursday, Mrs. Honey picked some dandelions to make some wine. It was very hard work, so she took off her hat and put it on the fence. A cow in the field saw the hat on the fence and thought, what beautiful big buttercups. She mooed, so she took a mouthful and her bell fell off onto Mrs. Honey's hat. Oh dear. On Friday, Mrs. Honey went to see an old castle. Just look at those cobwebs, exclaimed Mrs. Honey. This place could do with a really good clean. A big black spider dropped onto her hat. Hurrah, he said, this lace will make a good strong cobweb. So he hurried away with the lace and left behind all his old webs. Oh dear. On Saturday, Mrs. Honey took her cat to a cat show. There were all sorts of fine cats, but she hoped that hers would win first prize. There's the cats, look. An alley cat saw Mrs. Honey's hat through the window. That ribbon might help me win a prize, he thought. So he pulled it off the hat and left some old fish bones behind instead. But Mrs. Honey didn't even notice. Let me see him. That's the cat reaching the top of the hat. Oops, what's the next page? On Sunday, Mrs. Honey went to church. Everyone seemed to be staring at her. Whatever can it be, she wondered. Perhaps it's time I bought a new hat. After the service, Mrs. Honey hurried home to look in the mirror, and then she noticed the bubble gum, the eggs, the seaweed, the bell, the cobwebs, and the fish bones. Goodness me, she exclaimed, I have got a new hat. But she wasn't really sure that she liked it. And that's the end. Now, have you been paying attention, Naya? Let me see. What was Mrs. Honey's grandson's name? Can you remember? His name was Peter. What did the birds take from the hat and what did they leave behind? Can you remember? Gaga? They left the eggs behind and they took the cherries. Can you remember who ate the buttercups? That was the cow. Why did the cat take the ribbon from the hat? Why? Because they wanted to win at the show. And why did Mrs. Honey think the castle needed a good clean? Because it had lots of cobwebs. There we are. I hope you enjoyed the story, and we'll read you another one another day. Night night. Love you.